What's up, everybody? Welcome to Sector for Nerds, and welcome to another episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars Retro Discussions. Today we're going to be having a chat about Season 1, Episode 9, Cloak of Darkness. This episode was directed by Dave Filoni and written by Paul Dini. The cookie for this episode: ignore your instincts at your own peril. Before I turn it over to Intro Guy, make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers here on this channel. Also, if you could, head over to my other YouTube channel called Top 10 Character Moments and subscribe there as well. We just recently passed 300 subscribers over there, you guys, so thank you all so much for that. My next subscriber goal over there is 500 subscribers. So if you guys could, subscribe to my channels. It's free and it really helps support me as a content creator. Thank you all so much for your support. All right, you guys, so without any further ado, Intro Guy, take it away. Viceroy Gunray captured. Senator Padme Amidala has scored a victory against the Separatist Alliance on the remote world of Rhodia, securing the arrest of the diabolical Confederate leader, Newt Gunray. The Jedi Council has dispatched Master Luminara UNDULI and Anakin Skywalker's Padawan Ahsoka to escort the Viceroy to Coruscant under heavy guard. Once there, he will face trial for his many war crimes. Alright, first of all, thank you, Intro Guy, as always. But second, let me just stop you right there. Face trial for his many war crimes? Wasn't this the same dude that went under 4 different trials during the time between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and he still somehow ended up being the Viceroy of the Trade Federation? Something tells me that nothing would have changed this time around either. This is a very fun and action-heavy based episode of the Clone Wars. But one of the things that I want to talk about before diving deep into the episode itself is just the idea of having Ahsoka and Luminara in an episode together, and it being about the two of them. Now, this is the first time that we see Luminara UNDULI in the Clone Wars, besides like that one scene that she cameoed in Destroy Malevolence. And it was only a hologram. So here, not only are we able to see her in person, but we get to see her in action. Now, for fans of the micro series, you will have seen that Luminara and her Padawan Barisafi had a couple of episodes together on the planet Ilum. Those were fun episodes. And I always just remember thinking to myself, like, why do they have Ahsoka teaming up with Luminara? And, well, I may not be sure of the reasoning. What I could say is that maybe it's an opportunity for a Padawan to work with a different master. And that's one of the things, you guys, when I thought about it, like, man, like, if I was running my own Jedi Order, and that's something that I've always often think about, like, what if I ran my own Jedi Order? Maybe I'll do a video on that someday. But one of the things that I think all Padawans should do is, at least once or twice in their time as a Padawan, be able to go on a mission with a different master other than their own. Because the way I see it, it gives them experience working with other people. And once you do become a Jedi Master, right, or even just a Jedi Knight, you're bound to be working with other Jedi. So it's kind of one of those things where I almost feel like it's kind of a necessity just to kind of get you, you know, more comfortable with other people and understanding their point of views other than just the point of view of your own master. So that's why, like, in my headcanon, I always kind of looked at that way, right? Is that this was a chance for Ahsoka to get a little bit of a different perspective, because when it comes to Luminara and Ahsoka, they are two complete opposites. Little fun fact for you about Luminara in this episode that I didn't realize until watching the featurette for this episode, but apparently Luminara's lightsaber in this episode wasn't actually hers, it was Plo Koon's. Like, the design for it anyway. Killian Plunkett had talked about how there were under time restrictions and stuff, and they just figure, like, well, okay, this is one of those things where Luminara's lightsaber does look a little bit like Plo Koon's, so it was kind of one of those things where really only diehard fans of Luminara would have noticed the difference. Which, you know what, fair enough. And I think he did say that they do use Luminara's proper lightsaber later, which I will definitely have to check that out as we get further into the Clone Wars. Honestly, I didn't even know what Luminara's lightsaber looked like, so it kind of really meant nothing nothing to me. But for all the diehard Luminara fans that were wishing for her actual lightsaber, well, I am sorry for you. But going back to Ahsoka and Luminara, right? Luminara seems very upset with Ahsoka's tactics on things, but by the end of the episode, they have a bit of an understanding of each other. Like, one of the scenes that always sticks out to me in this episode is when the super battle droids start raining terror on the Venator, right? And Luminara has to go and help out the clones, and she tells Ahsoka, stay here with Captain Argyus and guard the Viceroy. And Ahsoka's gonna, like, sort of fire back and be like, but I want to help, and, you know, sort of the way she would with Anakin, right? Because she knows she can get away with that with Anakin. He kind of allows her to argue with her, and they kind of have their bittering back and forth, right? But, like, as soon as Ahsoka started to open her mouth and say something, Luminara just gave her this look like, are you questioning me, Padawan? And Ahsoka kind of realized, like, oh crap, I'm not dealing with Anakin. Like, I'm sorry, as you wish, Master. And she kind of like steps down. But I always just found that very interesting.
As you wish, Master.
But then by the end of this episode, after Ahsoka saves her life, Luminara is very grateful to her, and one of the lines that sticks out at the end for me is when Ahsoka and Luminara have their little back and forth where Ahsoka says, protecting a Jedi Master is the role of the Padawan, and Luminara just chips in, and teaching is usually the role of the Master.
Protecting a Jedi Master is the role of a Padawan.
And teaching is usually the role of the Master. Master Skywalker should be proud.
Honestly, it was after this episode where I'm like, I want to see more team up with these two together. Another thing that we're introduced to in this episode is the Senate Commandos. Now, they pretty much have like clone armor, but it's like painted up a little differently, painted blue, obviously, and the helmets are like the ones that we see them wearing in the Phantom Menace. But it's funny because David talked about in the featurette for this episode, very ironically, how he's like, I didn't want there to be a clone traitor. A little bit of foreshadowing to later on in this season, there is an episode where we get a clone traitor. So I don't know, maybe in Dave's mind, it was kind of like doing the same storyline twice, so you kind of want to switch it up a little bit. I don't know, just my thinking on it. One of the moments that always sticks out to me at the beginning of this episode is when Gunray is trying to bribe Commander Gree to get him out of there. And he's like, very tempting offer, Viceroy, but in the meantime, I got a little gift for you, and he brings out the cuffs. Sidious and Dooku chatting with each other towards the start of this episode as well, like after Luminara says, even now, Gunray's allies may be conspiring against us, which they were, because Sidious is like, all right, we gotta get Gunray out of here. We gotta do something, because he's not gonna last long under Jedi interrogation. And Dooku's like, don't worry, I got a plan to put into action, my lord. My best agent, Asajj Ventress, is going to go infiltrate the Jedi ship, either free Gunray or silence him. And Sidious brings up a very valid point, and it was something that I was going to bring up regardless. And as you are putting faith in someone who has failed us in the past, if we remind ourselves, the last time we saw Asajj Ventress in action would have been the first episode of the Clone Wars, and she got her butt handed to her by Yoda. Like, she got, I was joking about it then, but she got punked out hard. Yoda made her look like she was nothing more than a youngling in training.
Strong you are with the dark side, young one, but not that strong. Still much to learn, you have.
And it's one of those things, right? Like, every time I watch this episode, like, obviously I want the good guys to win, right? Like, I want Ahsoka and Luminara to, you know, be able to draw Ventress away. Maybe not necessarily to kill off Ventress, but, like, to get her out of there, you know, get Gunray to Coruscant. He can, you know, stand his trial that he'll probably get out of, but I just want them to get away, right? I want good to prevail. But when I thought about this episode, and I thought about the last time we saw Ventress in that ambush episode, I'm like, man, Ventress really needed this win, didn't she? To, like, put some credibility back on her. Like, when I'm little, like, I didn't really think about it all too much. I'm just like, Asajj Ventress, she's evil, get her. And here I'm just like, yeah, you know what, the last time Ventress had a shot, she freaking blew it, so she 100% needed to redeem herself, and this episode, she did just that. I do always question, though, why the Republic Venator didn't jump to hyperspace. Like, especially when all the droid fighters showed up in the boarding ships, like, why couldn't we have just made the jump? Also, why was there only one Venator taking Gunray to Coruscant? Like, if Gunray is such a high-level prisoner as we think he is, why would we not be sending more ships out there? Like, unless that was Palpatine, right? Like, oh, I'll send you one ship, we'll go, it's all good. Though I do think, it was probably the one Venator that was there at the end of the Rhodia episode, right? And they were in enemy territory. Like, that's what Palpatine said, is Padme ventured her way into enemy territory, so I guess it would make sense, but still, that even more reason why you wouldn't make the jump to hyperspace. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, we get to see Ventress, you know, and like throwing bombs all over the detonator. She completely beheads one of the clone troopers in the hangar. And then we get our first of many lightsaber battles in this episode, and that's Ahsoka versus Ventress.
If it isn't the hairless harpy.
If it isn't Skywalker's filthy, obnoxious little pet.
It is funny, like one of the things that David talked about in the featurette for this episode, and something I've always kind of thought about like ever since the Clone Wars Season 5 arc with Ahsoka and Ventress, but just like how much the two of them have in common, even before, you know, little bit of foreshadowing what happens to them later. But even now, it's like they're both Padawans. They're both trying to impress their masters. It just happens that Ventress is a little older and further in her training, so of course she's going to be better than Ahsoka. But yeah, I just remember like, oh my gosh, all right, Commandos, shoot her. Yeah. Oh, Ventress blocking him. No, she killed two of the guards. Get her, Argyus. But why did she kill the other two but not him? And forget about it. I will say, the moment in the Ahsoka Ventress like first duel in this episode where Ahsoka tries to kick Ventress, she ducks out of the way, and Ahsoka ends up doing the splits, and like even when she's in the split form, still defends herself against Ventress's strikes. I'm like, okay, that takes skill. I couldn't do the splits, let alone defend myself while doing the splits. And then New Gunray, while this is going on, is just in his cell. Over here! Open this door, I'll buy you a planet! Ventress like, ooh, I want a planet. And then, of course, they lock Ahsoka in the cell and they get Gunray out. Luminara, though, puts a stop to that real quickly.
Halt Assassin! Surrender.
And then Ventress, realizing she's surrounded, is like, all right, I'm gonna surrender. Not, and she sets off the detonators, and the reactor goes kaboom. Ventress gets out of there, and then that's where Luminara's like, all right, you all stay here and guard Gunray. I'll confront her myself. And Ahsoka's like, look, Master, with all due respect, Ventress is too powerful for even one Jedi to take on alone. Let me help you. And that's when, like, again, she tries to fight it, but Luminara's just like, stay here. And that whole time, Ahsoka's just sitting there venting with Argyus, like, look, Luminara UNDULI may be a Jedi Master, but she's got no idea what Ventress is capable of.
Luminara UNDULI may be a Jedi Master, but she has no idea what that bog witch is capable of. No idea.
And one of the lines that stood out to me from Argyus in this episode is sometimes being a good soldier means doing what you think is right, which is a good line. Unfortunately, I think he kind of takes his own line and twists it later, because what Argyus does later I don't think was necessarily what he thought it was right. Was more about just him being greedy. But Luminara and Ventress start battling each other. Ventress does get the better of her. There is a moment, though, where they do the Anakin and Obi-Wan force push thing that we see them do in Revenge of the Sith, where it's like they're both sitting there holding their hands right in front of each other, trying to push each other back with the Force, and they both get launched backwards. But like I said, it isn't until Ahsoka decides to go down there and help Luminara that Luminara ends up getting saved, and, you know, the two of them together stand a better chance against Ventress than it just been one-on-one. And once Ahsoka gets down there, she's like, I know, you told me to stay, and Luminara's just like, well, as long as you're here.
I know, you told me to stay.
Well, as long as you're here.
And so Ventress kind of goes into hiding, right? And she presses a button on her communicator, and all of a sudden, just randomly at the same time, Argyus also is getting notified on his transmitter. I'm like, oh, the dude's getting a transmission. And all of a sudden, he shoots the two guards, and I'm like, no, he's a traitor! And why I think Argyus was being greedy is because he says, Count Dooku's paying me a fortune to deliver your slimy carcass, Gunray, so try to stay alive. And him and Gree have a face-off, and Gree contacts Luminara while her and Ahsoka are having a conversation. Luminara starts to acknowledge Ahsoka a little bit more, like, look,
This assassin, I've never faced an adversary like her. I should have listened to your advice.
And that's when they get the call, and Luminara's like, all right, we gotta go back up there. And so, of course, Ventress then decides to appear out of hiding because she's got to distract the Jedi now. She's just got to buy time for Argyus to get out of there. And they have a crazy lightsaber battle, the three of them. And there's a move where, like, Ahsoka goes in for a move and, like, Ventress blocks it. And then Luminara runs up behind Ahsoka and does, like, this crazy spin move. And as, like, Ahsoka ducks and then Ventress gets out of the way of it. But I'm like, man, every time I watch that episode, I just want to see that move connect because it just looks so clean. I'm like, I want to see Luminara, like, use that on somebody. That's why I said if we could have seen more episodes with Ahsoka and Luminara, like, that'd have been sick. And meanwhile, while Commander Gree is distracted with Argyus, Gunray sneaks up behind Gree with a clone blaster and just, like, smacks it across his back.
You and I disagree on what makes a good son.
Argyus sends Ventress a signal. Ventress gets in on her comm. She's like, all right, my work's done here. And so she crawls back through the vent, launches another detonator on one of the reactor cores. And so then now Luminara is the one who has to save Ahsoka because Ahsoka was, like, jumping up after her and the explosion just, like, completely knocked Ahsoka away. Had it not been for Luminara, Ahsoka probably would have been dead. But kudos to Ventress in this episode. She really did prove herself as a warrior and proved herself worthy of being Dooku's apprentice. Argyus and Gunray use the Republic shuttle that we first see them on in the start of the episode, and they use that shuttle to make their getaway. Ventress gets in an escape pod, and once she ends up getting on the transport, ends up killing Argyus. And Gunray, that frickin' slime, who's just sitting there like, I always had a good feeling about you, Captain. Ventress walks on the bridge, kills Argyus. I always had a good feeling about you, Assassin. I'm sitting there like, okay, Ventress, I'm, like, slightly happy for you that you were able to redeem yourself, girl, but also, like, you really gotta be doing this for this piece of crap. But yeah, like, I just remember watching this episode, and as, like, Luminara and Ahsoka get to the escape pods, and you know, obviously Ventress is already launched away, and then they go to the window and they see the shuttle making its getaway, and they see Ventress making her getaway, and I'm like, it was kind of one of those moments, like, especially as a kid, like, did we just lose?
Did we just lose?
Because at this point, right, like, all of the Clone Wars episodes that we've seen so far, we've been getting win after win after win. And this was the first time where it was like, oh, we just lost. And I think that's essential, right? Like, it is one of those things that, and I wish they would have done it a little bit more in the earlier seasons as well, especially with some of those Grievous episodes where Grievous kept losing, right? Like, to show him getting some wins. The good guys don't always win, and sometimes you gotta take L's before you can take W's. But according to Luminara, not all is lost because of the fact that they used a Republic ship to make their getaway. It could be tracked. And they're talking about this with Anakin Skywalker and Yoda over a transmitter. And Luminara says that Master Fisto's fleet was near Gunray's position. I've contacted him to follow the signal. So immediately that kind of makes you go, oh, okay, so that's probably going to be our next episode then. Is Master Fisto going to capture Gunray? And that is one of the cool things about, like, what I consider this to be a 3-episode arc is just, like, every episode of this arc had different characters involved. Like, last episode you had Padme, C-3PO, and Jar Jar. This episode you had Ahsoka and Luminara and Asajj Ventress. And next week you're going to have Kit Fisto. And another character that we've seen plenty of times before in this season. I think for now, you guys, that is going to wrap us up. Again, this was another really enjoyable episode of the Clone Wars. I liked seeing Ahsoka and Luminara teamed up. I liked seeing Asajj Ventress. And I always have a heck of a time watching this episode. Thank you guys so much for checking out this discussion video on the Clone Wars retro discussions. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with others to help support the channel, and I will see you guys next time.
Protecting a Jedi Master is the role of a Padawan.
And teaching is usually the role of the Master.